The M3 MacBook Pro starts out at $300 more than the previous model. It does address some of the concerns that I had, but there's something about the battery life that I don't quite understand. So let's talk about what Apple did here and whether or not this newer model is actually worth getting. Now, first of all, I fully support the decision to get rid of the 13-inch MacBook Pro. The entire MacBook lineup was getting congested. There were less expensive models with better features than more expensive models. There were some outdated features. So this is definitely a step in the right direction. Obviously, we're getting a bigger display with the 14-inch model, and we'll get to that in just a moment. But essentially, Apple took the design of the M1 and M2 14-inch MacBook Pro and applied it to the entry-level model. Well, except for the ports. If you remember, one of the issues that I had with the 13-inch MacBook Pro is that there are only 2 Thunderbolt ports and that they were both on the same side. Now, only having 2 ports was a problem with the previous model because you had to use one of them for charging, and also they were the only ports you had. So if you wanted more than one accessory or a different type of port, then you're stuck using a hub. With the newer model, there's still only 2 Thunderbolt ports, but we're also getting an SDXC card reader and an HDMI port, which supports up to 4K 120. Now, of course, both models have a 3.5mm headphone jack, so you're always able to use wired headphones or a headset, but the 14-inch M3 model also comes with a MagSafe port, so now you don't need to use one of the Thunderbolt ports to keep your MacBook charging, and you have protection from an accidental cable pull. Yeah, I'm talking to you, Mac. And by the way, her name is Mac, but ironically, she's not named after the Mac. Now, one thing that didn't change about the ports is that there's still only Thunderbolt ports on the left side of the 14-inch MacBook Pro instead of one on each side. Now, I don't know if it was a cost issue or maybe it's another way to separate it from the higher end M3 Pro and M3 Max models, but in any case, if you want to be able to connect a Thunderbolt accessory or charge your MacBook from the right side, you still need to pay for one of those more expensive models. Now, both of these laptops are listed at the same height when closed, but the 13-inch MacBook Pro has a more tapered design, whereas the 14-inch model is boxier. It's also a little bit wider, deeper, and heavier, so if you're prioritizing portability, 13-inch model is the way to go. If you want a more solid pro feel, that's definitely the 14-inch model. Now, another important upgrade and one that was super needed, again, because we're talking about a pro device here, is the display. So obviously the 14-inch is about an inch bigger, but Apple also upgraded from Liquid Retina to Liquid Retina XDR, so now it's mini LED backlit. We're getting a higher resolution, the display is brighter for both SDR and HDR content, and we're getting ProMotion, so it's a 120 Hz display versus 60 Hz on the M2 model. Now, first of all, this solves the issue of the M2 MacBook Air having a better display than the 13-inch M2 MacBook Pro. But also now, you don't need to pay for one of the more capable M3 Pro or M3 Max chips just to get the better display. And I think that's a huge selling point. The Liquid Retina XDR display is not just better on paper, it's a noticeably better display, and everything that you do on it looks better. Now, if you're just working with spreadsheets or reading documents all day, the actual image quality probably doesn't matter to you too much, but you could still see more content without having to scroll, and the additional brightness is always great when you want to work outside or when you're working in environments where you might have to deal with reflections. Now, if you're watching video, again, it's a noticeable difference, especially for HDR content. There's nothing wrong with the 13-inch model, but the 14-inch is clearly a better display. And of course, if you're doing anything like photo and video editing, if you're doing animations or anything that has to do with graphics, it's an easy win for the M3 model. Now it's time for my typical notch disclaimer for anyone who might bring it up. Yes, I'd rather it not be there, but no, it doesn't bother me. It's never bothered me because it's pretty much always behind the menu bar. And if having it means that I can have a larger display with a higher resolution and a smaller form factor, I'll take it. Now with both of these, we're still only getting support for one external display. We could do 6K at 60 Hz using a Thunderbolt port, or as I mentioned earlier, with the 14-inch model, we can also do 4K 120 over HDMI. And speaking of external display support, if you watched my MacBook accessories video, I showed you how to connect 3 4K displays to any MacBook or Mac that has at least an M1 chip in it. And in that video, I was using the PD2725U, but BenQ actually makes 3 different models specifically designed for Mac users. These monitors don't just look great, but they're shipped with default color settings that perfectly match MacBook colors. They also have something called MBook mode, which provides active color syncing so that the colors on the MacBook display and the colors on the BenQ display look the same. And this way, if I'm editing video or photos, I know that I can trust the colors that I see. They have plenty of ports and the stand is super versatile, so you can tilt your display, you can lower or raise it. You can easily switch between landscape and portrait mode. They have a built-in KVM switch, so you can use the same display, keyboard, and mouse with 2 different devices. And I love the Hotkey Puck G2 because it gives me easy access to all the monitor's features without having to mess around with tiny buttons on the back of the monitor. So click the link in the description to learn more about BenQ's 3 displays designed specifically for Macs, and thank you to BenQ for sponsoring this portion of the video. Now, when we look at the keyboards, there are some similarities, but also some super important differences. On the 14-inch MacBook Pro, the well, or the bottom of the keyboard, is black anodized aluminum, which I think looks awesome. The keys themselves are the same size on both boards and they have the same feel to them, so the typing experience is very similar, but the 14-inch is a little bit deeper and there's a little more room for your wrists to rest on. The more significant difference is that on the 13-inch MacBook Pro, we have a small escape key, a touch bar, and then a small Touch ID button. On the 14-inch MacBook Pro, we have a row of full-sized function keys. Now, some people love the touch bars, some people don't. I happen to actually really like it, but in any case, the 13-inch M2 MacBook Pro is the last MacBook to have a touch bar, at least until Apple brings it back as a new feature. Now, the trackpads on both are awesome. Apple might make my favorite trackpad on any laptop, and these two are no exception. Now, Apple did upgrade the camera and speaker system. The new camera on the 14-inch is 1080p instead of 720 on the 13-inch. It also takes advantage of the newer ISP on the M3 chip, so it's better in low light, and here's a quick sample. Here's a camera and microphone test of the 14-inch M3 MacBook Pro and the 13-inch M2 MacBook Pro. This should give you a pretty good idea of the type of image quality that you're going to get and the type of audio quality that you should expect if you use these for video calls. If you use the speakers on your MacBook, then the ones on the 13-inch MacBook Pro are good, but the 14-inch model will definitely sound fuller and have more presence. So if speaker quality is a priority for you, go with the 14-inch. Now let's talk about what's under the hood, like what's gonna happen when we take these out for a spin. Both of these are the entry-level models, so we're getting an 8-core CPU with 4 high-performance cores and 4 high-efficiency cores, a 10-core GPU, 16-core neural engine, and 100 gigabytes per second memory bandwidth. We can see that the M3 chip has a little over an 18% improvement in single-core performance compared to the M2, and also 18% for multi-core performance, which makes sense since we have the same number of cores. I also wanted to run a more extreme test, so I used Cinebench with 30 minutes of running at 100%, and neither one of these throttled back. For GPU performance, again, we see the newer M3 chip come out ahead, so if you're doing a lot of GPU intensive work, that's something that you want to keep in mind. Now with battery life, things got really interesting. So first of all, we're getting a 58.2 watt-hour battery on the 13-inch versus 70 watt-hour on the 14-inch model. We're also getting a lower capacity 67 watt USB-C power adapter with the 13-inch model versus 70 watts on the 14-inch, which can be upgraded to 96 watts for $20. But here's where things get interesting because Apple rated the M3 MacBook Pro higher, giving it 22 hours of Apple TV app movie playback versus 20 hours on the 13-inch MacBook Pro, which makes sense, right? We got a newer, a more efficient chip, a bigger battery, but for wireless web browsing, it's actually the opposite. It's rated lower at 15 hours versus 17 hours on the older, smaller model. Now, my guess is this has something to do with the new media engine on the M3 chip, which now includes support for AV1 decode, which in turn provides a more efficient and higher quality video experience from streaming services. So keep in mind this delta in battery performance when you're choosing based on what you typically do. Now, the price difference is a little misleading because we're looking at $1,600 for the M3 MacBook Pro versus $1,300 for the M2, but the M3 MacBook Pro comes with 512 gigabytes of internal storage versus only 256 on the M2 model. This is definitely one of the comments that I made about the M2 model because I don't think that a Pro device should start with 256. Now, these chips are so powerful and they will continue to perform well for so many years. And I find it hard to believe that there are a lot of users that actually need the sustained performance of a MacBook Pro versus something like a MacBook Air, but only need 256 gigabytes of storage. I'm not saying they don't exist. I just think it's a very small segment. Now, both MacBooks start out with 8 gigabytes of unified memory, which can be upgraded all the way up to 24 gigabytes. And we can debate whether a Pro device should start with 16. Personally, I think yes, again, because of longevity, but you let me know what you think. In any case, you'd have to pay an additional $200 to upgrade the internal storage on the 13-inch MacBook Pro up to 512 gigabytes if you want to compare apples to apples. Now, a more cynical person might say that Apple is actually charging you for that upgrade with a higher price on the 14-inch M3 MacBook Pro. But I think that $300 for a bigger, better, and brighter display, better speakers, a better camera system, a more powerful chip, MagSafe and HDMI ports, an SDXC card reader, and the upgrade from Bluetooth 5.0 to 5.3 is a pretty good deal. Now you should watch the MacBook accessory video that I told you about or this comparison. You know what I always say? Buy it nice or buy it twice. Good luck and see you soon.